This Week in Startups is brought to you by Mandrill, the best way to send transactional email from the people who make MailChimp. Sign up today at mandrill.com. And by Hiscox. Do you have the proper insurance for your startup? Get the right insurance right now with Hiscox. Tailored coverage starting at only $22.50 a month. Visit hiscox.com/smallbiz to get a quote. And Amazon Web Services. The fastest growing, hottest startups build their businesses on Amazon Web Services. Learn more at aws.amazon.com/startups.
Hey everybody, it's Jason Calacanis. This Week in Startups. Today my guests are Chris Anderson of 3D Robotics and formerly the editor of Wired Magazine, and Charles Forman, the founder of OMGPop and Picture Life. And these two gentlemen are really obsessed with all things robotics and quadcopters, so we're going to have a bunch of stories in that space and how they're impacting the world, as well as the other news of the week, including Spotify and Snapchat raising at $3 and $4 billion valuations. A lot of news this week and a great theme, quadcopters and more. Stick with us.
That's what it's all about, man. They said money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah. Money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. Gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
Hey everybody, it's Jason Calacanis, and this is This Week in Startups. Thanks for tuning in. This is the program where we talk about starting companies, technology, and all that kind of great stuff. It's our 400th episode. Oh my God, this has been going on a while, and we get great guests on the program to talk about important topics, and this week is no different. This week I have Chris Anderson, the CEO of 3D Robotics and the former editor-in-chief of Wired Magazine. Welcome to the program, Chris Anderson. How are you?
Thanks. Great. Good to be here.
And how is 3D Robotics doing? This is you now are an entrepreneur doing startups.
I am now an entrepreneur doing startups. Yeah. So this is like I'm 10 months into the job. The company is about 3 years old, but I came on board and we raised a big VC round, and I came on board as CEO about 10 months ago. We are about 150 people, and among other things, I run a Tijuana, Mexico drone factory. So lots to talk about.
Wow, that's incredible. And wait, did you say you have 150 people in the company?
Yep.
Wow, that's incredible.
All of them are Mexican factory workers.
Oh, I see.
Hey, they count.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just thought it was like 150 people in Silicon Valley doing something, and I was like, wow, that's kind of a big budget, but I get it. You're actually manufacturing real product. We'll get into that. Charles Forman, serial entrepreneur, founder of OMGPop, and also obsessed with quadcopters and all such things. How are you doing, Charles?
I'm good. I'm hearing a audio loop right now of it's delayed. It's impossible to concentrate.
Oh, you must. If you have Ustream or any other thing open, go ahead and close that, and we'll try to get that sorted out. Hey, the launch festival is coming up, and that will be at the end of February. Go to festival.launch.co and go buy a ticket. The tickets start as low as $50. We make it super, super affordable for folks to come, and we want to have you there. 40 new companies will be launching, and about 20 CEOs of existing companies will be doing fireside demos with me, which is sort of like you've got an existing company, you're doing something incredible, but you're not launching something new necessarily, but we're going to talk about what you built and where it's going. So we're sort of adding that to the mix in this year's festival. All right, so the big news of the week, of course, was Snapchat raising at a huge, huge valuation. CEO Evan Spiegel talked with the Goldman investors at that closed-door conference going on, and they're going to experiment with advertising and virtual goods. Nobody knows exactly how many users there are on the service, but they do know that there's 400 million pictures going back and forth every day, which is somewhere in the same range as Facebook. So the number of pictures, similar to Facebook, the number of users, absolutely nowhere near that. Interesting news was 70% of the users were women, and people are saying they would have to generate $500 million in revenue and have $200 million in profit to support that $3 billion valuation. What do you think, Chris Anderson, watching this and watching historically a couple of bubbles in your career? Does it feel to you like this is out of line, this valuation, or What do you think's going on with Snapchat?
I have stopped even guessing at valuations. In my defense, I had heard of Snapchat before this, but just barely, and only because I have kids.
Yeah.
I don't know. How many months ago would that have been Instagram, and how many months before that would that have been something else? I mean, Jason, how many of these sort of, instantaneous burst out of the gates stories have you seen, and how many are lasting?
Yeah, that is a very big question. I mean, these things get very big, very quick now, which is distinctly different than the first web companies, right? They were sort of a slow growth, if they grew at all. And today, you can get to millions of users pretty quick. Charles, I hope we have the audio problems solved.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on this?
Well, as the beneficiary of a lot of luck, I would say they should take the money and run.
Yeah, I mean, speaking.
I think. I mean, and the other thing is I'm not completely up to date, but is that valuation legit, or is that sort of self-reported banker bullshit?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be they've raised money at this valuation. I mean, I think this is not like we aspired to have this valuation. It's we have raised money at this valuation, so somebody actually placed a bet. But of course, you're referring to, the great sale of OMGPop to Zynga for $200 million or whatever it was. Hard to know as a founder if you've reached the top or not. When you guys sold OMGPop, did you feel like this was just, as big as it could get, or as reasonably big as it get? What was your thinking, in terms of selling at that point?
Well, I mean, at that time we were number one for a significant amount of time. Where do you go from number one? You go, basically you just go down.
Right.
So of course, it was a little bit of an irrational price, but as far as Snapchat's valuation, I'm curious as to why that large. But I think it can only really be sort of justified in the context of maybe that amount of engagement that's happening from teens is taking, $3 billion out of the value of Facebook. That's the only thing I can possibly think. I
think that's probably how people are looking at it. They're probably looking at Instagram for $1 billion, Facebook at $100 billion. Okay, how important is this relative to those two things? And maybe building from there. But I wonder if it's a lasting company or just a fad. I mean, I guess that's sort of a big issue. What do you think? Having been the editor of Wired for a long time, what do you think is there any way to tell if these things are going to be a fad, Chris, or going to be sustainable when you watch them? Do you have any sort of inner, tells or inner guidance on that?
I certainly have inner tells. Unfortunately, they're no righter than anybody else's.
Yeah.
I was an early user of Twitter. Decided I didn't get it. It couldn't possibly sustain, and here we are today. So I was totally wrong about that. I don't know how anybody can decide whether this is really has sustainable lock-in network effect deal going on, or whether it's just, the teenage, fickleness is going to move on to the next thing next year. How could anyone know?
Yeah, and we also had Spotify raise $250 million at a $4 billion valuation, although that one does have very real revenue. They're actually reporting their revenue of close to $600 million compared to Pandora's $400 million. So that's actually kind of a real business. What are you guys' thoughts on Spotify as a business? You guys use it?
Yeah, I do. I think Spotify represents something with much higher barriers to entry. I mean, all those license deals, the industry contacts. Again, Jason, you know this stuff really well. Yeah. It's a sophisticated cloud service. It's got apps on all platforms. I happen to prefer audio to Spotify, but that's just a matter of taste. I do think that it's in a different class from, say, Snapchat.
Charles, your thoughts?
I use it. I love it. From my perspective, the people that I am friends with, the engineers who are getting heavily recruited by Spotify, from what they talk about, and this is exploratory, they're going to use those subs to explore different opportunities for revenue. One of the things that they've been talking about is getting into video and the long tail of videos, so maybe the short film market or the stuff that Netflix does not pick up. Which by using Netflix is almost everything. But yeah. There's huge opportunity. They have a lot of subs, extremely good brand, and very very positive brand loyalty from the people that do use it. So
yeah, it does seem there's a world of possibilities for them to, maybe segue due to this consumer loyalty into video, whether it's music videos or actually TV series, and become sort of a Netflix, Amazon Video, Prime Video competitor. But I also think they may have some ambition of being sort of a label record replacement in terms of getting artists more money, like doing actual concerts or merchandise and building mailing lists for the actual artists. What do you think about that sort of, Chris, somebody building a soup to nuts solution where they could actually start to take over some of what a label does?
There have been so many people who tried to do this, the so-called 360, representation, doing the bookings and representing them in licensing. The problem is that they tend not to be best of breed at everything. Maybe you'll know better than me, but why do you think that 360 representation hasn't taken off to date?
Yeah, well, I mean, it has to a certain extent with like Live Nation doing like the Jay-Z deal or something like that, because you can't make the money off the album. So I guess they're like, well, if we're going to spend all this money promoting the album and the money's really being made in concerts, we got to sort of maybe get to that revenue. So I don't know that anything's...
In other markets, though, it does work fairly well. Like in Korea, that's where the majority of the money is made by the Korean labels. So, I mean, I think probably logistically it's very difficult in the United States, but in smaller markets, it totally does work.
Yeah, they own, in the K-pop market, they own the entire artist. Like, it's like they own like a brand.
Right.
Yeah. All right, listen, when we get back from commercial break, we're going to get into our startup of the week, which will be actually all drone and quadcopter based, and we're going to really drill into this space because it's a fascinating space, and one that you've probably seen videos of but haven't actually thought of the ramifications on a business level, like our two guests have. Hey, thanks to our friends over at Mandrill. If you don't know what Mandrill is, it's transactional email by our friends at MailChimp. If you don't know what transactional email is, that's basically all those emails that you get that say you reset your password, or you've got a friend, or somebody's challenging you to a match on Draw Something, or whatever it happens to be. They have servers all over the world. They have real-time analytics. They monitor performance, and they make improvements constantly to their software. Their software is incredibly affordable. The first 12,000 emails a month are always free. And actually saw some folks on Hacker News were like, yeah, I mean, I use it on my startups and I've never paid them. Well, how do they go about doing that? They know that if they do a great job with their service, you're going to build your service, and they'll make money off the people who build successful businesses. There's no feature gating, so all features are available to all users. Go ahead and sign up at mandrill.com and thank @Mandrill app on your Twitter account. That's man and a drill, right? MAN and DRILL. Super easy to get started. We use it for all of our transactional emails here at launch. It's a great company, and they've been great supporters of what we're doing here. All right, gentlemen, the reason I had you on the program was because of your knowledge of quadcopters. Maybe we could start with you, Chris. You left the most prestigious technology journalism gig in the world to start a quadcopter or drone company. Why did you choose to do that? I mean, you monitored all the technology out there for a decade as the editor of Wired, and then you picked one to go pursue as an entrepreneur. It must have been some compelling reason. What was it?
Boils down to follow your heart, but it wasn't a one-step process. Basically, I guess it must have been about 2007. I started messing around with Lego Mindstorm's robotics and my kids, and trying to think of something that would impress them with robotics, which is actually really hard to do because Hollywood has made it impossible to do anything as cool as computer graphics. So they weren't impressed with little sort of rolling robots or walking robots. And I thought, what if a robot could fly? Which we kind of almost did. Put a little Lego Mindstorm sensors and processor into an airplane, and it flew just. They lost interest. I kind of went down the rabbit hole, started a community called DIY Drones to really just think it out. What's going on here? How's it possible that a guy like me, can Google drone and build one out of Lego around the dining room table with his kids? And the answer is smartphones. It turns out that period, the 2007 period, is when sensors, MEMS sensors, accelerometers, and gyros, etc., were becoming super cheap and available thanks to things like the Wii controller. And so the community went on for a while, grew. People were trading ideas, sharing design files, and it was clear that regular people, an open source model, could in fact build a drone. And then we're like, okay, people were like, that's terrific, thank you for sharing the files. Could you just make it for me, make a kit? And a guy I met online, Jordi Munoz, and I said, let's start a company. This is 3 years ago. Let's start a company. He was full-time, soldering boards together. I would, every quarter I'd get my kids to pack kits into pizza boxes. And one day, he just showed me the book, our revenues, and we were going to do $5 million that year. And I was like, holy crap, this is a real company.
So people are starting to actually buy these. And can you explain for people who are neophytes, what is the difference between a drone? Because when you say drone, we immediately think military drone, those little mini airplanes. And then really these are quadcopters or tricopters. Those are really what I think people are really the industry. Is that correct?
Exactly. So we've had radio-controlled aircraft, planes, and helicopters, et cetera, for decades. But what a drone is it's got an autopilot. It's got let's say, a plane with a brain. This is an example of one of ours. This is our one that's be coming out in a couple of weeks. It's a quadcopter, which means it has 4 blades. Behind me is an octocopter, which has 8. They also come in 3s and 6s, et cetera. But what they have is an autopilot, and this autopilot typically has GPS and allows for autonomous flight. So what that means is rather than piloting it pilots itself. Automatic takeoff, follows waypoints, conduct a mission, train the camera on something, follow something, land, etc. And that's the difference between radio control and unmanned aerial vehicles or fully autonomous drones. And that's only been possible at this price point, which is like $500 to $1,000. It's only been possible really over the past few years, again, because it's just sort of smartphone technology laid out in different ways with different code.
Charles, you've really jumped down the rabbit hole on this. What attracted you to it, and what state is your obsession at right now?
I saw the first video of a quadcopter flying around, and I just thought it was the coolest fucking thing in the world. And it doesn't really get more complicated than that, other than you sort of see a quadcopter for the first time, and you get the same feeling as when, at least specifically when I was a kid and I had an Apple II computer. It's just like, you don't know exactly what you're going to be doing with this thing, but the nerd boner is huge. Similar to the way people are enthusiastic about 3D printing, quadcopters are amazing. So the first time when you fly one, it's just, it's like you're flying, and especially if you fly with the goggles, and you can see where you're flying. But at this point, I have 4 of them. I'm working on my own, actually, a port of another piece of flight controller. So I'm actively committing to some flight controller OS, and I'm just having a lot of fun in terms of the engineering aspect of quadcopters. Now,
is one of the most important parts of all this the fact that they don't crash to the level that other ones did? Because when you actually take one of the 4 corners of one of these quadcopters and you push it down, it somehow intelligently knows to, or if you push it while it's in the air, it self-corrects. Chris, how does that actually technically work?
Yeah, so what's interesting about these is that they're essentially solid state. So rather than having like an airplane, elevators and ailerons, et cetera, this just spins motors at different speeds. You've got 2 propellers go one way, 2 propellers go the other way, and an autopilot, which is thinking really fast and measuring its orientation, just changes those speeds and which props to maintain stability. This would not be possible with a human being. You need to move faster. It needs to sense faster than a human could do. So it's essentially only autopilot controllable, and that's why quadcopters didn't really exist prior to about 4 or 5 years ago.
So you're saying the sensors that came out in the phones, because they were so cheap and the wee thing, they go into these quadcopters, and the quadcopters basically don't crash. Can they crash? I mean, what do you have to do to take one down at this point?
They can crash all the time. I mean, first of all, you can crash them. You're piloting them, and you can always make a piloting error and crash. And motors can fail. Electronics can fail. Software can fail. I mean, it's just yes, they do crash all the time.
If one of the 4 motors fails, does it go down, or does the other 3 compensate?
Yeah, so with a 4, it goes down because you can just do the math, and you've got 4 degrees of freedom. You've lost it with control over 1, it goes down. But that's why we moved to you can also do things like the 8-bladed ones, which has the coaxial, 1 on the top, 1 on the bottom, and so that adds a level of redundancy to each prop. Once you get to 8 or even 6, you can actually lose a prop and it'll stay in the air.
Oh, wow. So, Charles, have you experienced like massive crashes? And when you crash these things, does it cost you $500 or $1,000 each time, Charles?
Yeah, I've experienced somewhat of crash. Like, basically, when you first fly them, you start babying them. And as you fly more aggressively, it's sort of in lockstep with, as you know, the more aggressively you fly, the more experience you have, the less crashes you have. But when you do have a crash, it's sort of massive. But what's nice about these is, at least from a tech perspective, every piece is replaceable. So if you break a prop, you buy a new prop, and props are like $30 at least, these plastic props. If you break the frame, you can replace the frame. Everything is replaceable. What's more interesting is that every time you crash the quad, it's sort of an opportunity to actually even upgrade it in some cases. So if you had plastic props and you were thinking about upgrading to carbon fiber, you can do that. And so from the perspective of a tech person, I think the reason why people are so interested is that every sort of build of these things can be as unique as you sort of put your ideas into it.
Let's take a look at some of the top projects that are going on right now. We have 3 of them here, and we'll do this as our Bing launch of the week. Yes, Bing. Oh, wow, look at that. Wow, special graphics and everything. The Bing launch of the week. Get it? Launching quadcopters, all that kind of great stuff. Thanks, Bing. Fine search engine if there ever was one. So the first one we have is using drones to map the Amazon forest. And do we have video of that actually, or are we just going to talk about it? I don't see a video link here. No, they haven't done it. Okay, so I'll just describe this. Wake Forest conservative biologists are using drones to conduct climate research and peruse tropical cloud forests. Drones gather thermal data down to a few centimeters and visible light data down to the sub-centimeter level. Bird's eye view of one of the most difficult locations in the world to study. The team is using a copter drone that can fly at 15 miles an hour for 20 minutes at a time. How much of the use of drones today is for uses like this, Chris?
You know, I would say that about maybe a third of our users are just hobbyists who are doing it for fun, about a third are developers, and a third are actually trying to get a job done. And what you've described is scientific sensing, which is one use of them, and it's terrific. I mean, basically just putting cameras in the air to give a perspective you wouldn't otherwise get. People are using wildlife management, agriculture, crop surveys, security, looking for poachers, all that stuff. It's I think at this point, it's all a little experimental. The Amazon rainforest is big, and these drones tend to be quite small. So you mentioned that one has a range of 20 minutes. Well, so that's typical for a quadcopter. 20 minutes will cover a couple miles. How would you survey a large area? Typically, in that case, you would move to a fixed wing, to an airplane rather than a quadcopter, and then you move from electric power to gas power. They get larger, and I think that right now people are just experimenting with what does the world look like from the sky, and what would we learn, and then you start to scale it up to actually get a job done.
Let's do the next one, which we actually do have video of, so you can play the video while I'm talking, guys, and I'll just talk over it. Consumer quadcopter with a great camera board. DJI Phantom 2 Vision quadcopter, I guess was announced this week or is coming out. Designed with hobby-level aerial photographer and videographers in mind, and 14-megapixel high-def point of view with integrated Wi-Fi downlink for smartphones, which I guess means you can watch in high-def the video. Elegant app to watch live images. Capable of up to 25 minutes of flight time, $1,200. What do you think of that, Charles, and that launch?
I mean, I think it's awesome. Anything that is released that makes it available to as many people as possible. And keep in mind that the quadcopters have been fairly inaccessible to most people prior to DJI Phantom. You would have to buy these kits, put them together yourself. You would have to solder things. This is the first time, with the exception of the Phantom, which is behind me, that you can sort of ready to fly, pick it up out of the box, and it's just, you can fly it almost immediately. And when you look at the tech that's involved, it's pretty much everything you could want. It has a camera on there. The camera feeds back to your iPhone or your iPad, which has like a Wi-Fi extender, and it basically you see what the quad sees. It's amazing. So at $1,200, and I'm sure I think you can even buy it on Amazon for $1,200. at least the rich kids are going to have a good Christmas this year.
Where do you think this comes down to, Chris, in terms of price? We see this and I guess the DJI Phantom 2 would be a competitor to some of your drones.
Yeah.
Where are these drones at right now in terms of price for one of these, let's call it robust ones, 20 minutes in the air and making really good HD videos? And where will it come down to?
Yeah, so what the DJI one represents is video. It does have a GPS, so it can do some limited things like position hold and come back, to home, come back to your launch position. If you just want to fly a quadcopter, you can get them for like $30 on Amazon, the small sort of toy-sized ones, and some of them do have video of some sort. And so I think that of course we're seeing the price come down. I think at this point it's really a question of, do you just want to have fun and learn, play in the backyard, in which case $30 will do it. Do you want to get low resolution video? Do you want to get high resolution video? Do you want to do this what Charles mentioned before, the notion of first person view, having goggles on? Do you want it to be autonomous? Do you want to have to fly it, or do you let it fly itself? So I think with that $1,200 for the Vision is it's going to come down, and that'll probably be $600 next Christmas. But today, if you want a $30 quadcopter that's a lot of fun inside and out, you can buy it right now.
And this 3DR one you're making that looks pretty awesome. What is that going to retail for?
This is our Iris. It's sort of it's aimed at the same market as the DJI Vision, which is to say it's just a box. It works right out of the box. Everything comes with it. It goes a little bit further in that it has a stabilized gimbal. So it's got a GoPro, but the GoPro automatically stabilizes, so you get that you get a very smooth smooth video. It's also a real drone, which is to say it's fully autonomous and controllable via a tablet or a phone, in addition to RC. And so one of the things we're trying to do here, this will be, I think, with the gimbal, it'll be less than $1,000. What we're trying to do, though, is to move away from the kind of the radio control interface where you got sticks, which is hard for some people, a lot of people, including me, and instead move to one that is really sort of mobile first, tablet first. Point, tap, go there, gesture, draw a line with your finger and have it follow that. Just to try to use autonomy to reimagine the flight experience for a generation of people who don't necessarily want to fly, but just want to get great video.
All right, when we get back from the commercial break, we're going to talk about the actual utilization of these and the Flying Donkey project, which is bringing cargo drones to Africa to deliver stuff on roads that maybe are not accessible, or areas that are not accessible because the roads get washed out and all that kind of stuff. Hey, thanks to our friends at Hiscox Small Business. They offer customized coverage and competitive pricing on small business insurance. And I'm excited to tell you about the launch of the Hiscox Reactor, an online experience that takes you through a personalized virtual career journey, all powered by the details of your LinkedIn profile. Every action has a reaction, and those actions can lead to business success or business failure. At the end of the journey, you'll see your image appear on the cover of Fast Company magazine, giving you insight onto how it would look if you were named the Hiscox Business Owner of the Year. You can download and save the picture and share it across social media like I have. Go visit reactor.hiscoxusa.com. And thanks to our friends at Hiscox for supporting This Week in Startups. They do a great job with small business insurance, and I use it myself. Okay, so when we went before we went to commercial break, I was talking about the Flying Donkey project. Do we have video of that one? Or is that another one without video? These work better with video, guys. So the Flying Donkey project is, let's see, a nonprofit, and their aim is to use cargo drones to bring e-commerce to Africa. The competition will run in stages through 2020. It's kind of an XPRIZE model, and the teams will create rugged, unmanned robots that can fly around Mount Kenya and pick up and deliver cargo in under 24 hours. What do you think about this, Charles? Is this really going to be the first killer application of quadcopters and the drone space, is actually delivering stuff? How realistic is that?
Well, the jury's out on what the actual applications will be, but I mean, as far as an application goes and an application objective, it's pretty awesome. I think in this particular case, these aren't like quads. They're specifically, unless energy density gets better in batteries, these are fixed wing aircrafts that are autonomous. So you could imagine that if you had two airports where you can secure your cargo and have essentially what looks like a small plane with no pilot in it, It's completely feasible, and of course, yeah. Why wouldn't this exist? Especially given that people are valuable. The idea that if a cargo plane crashes or is captured, that's a pretty big deal. So yeah, it's totally possible. It is the most talked about potential application of drones as far as non-military use. So you've seen probably the novel examples of people delivering pizza or sushi or dry cleaning or cakes in China. As far as how effective that is, I'm not too certain, especially with the use of quadcopters. They only fly, 12 to 25 minutes, and with cargo, even less than that. So I'm not certain how effective that is yet, but with better battery technology, absolutely, this is the future.
What do you think, Chris? How far out are we from a Domino's pizza being delivered by quadcopter, which obviously there's a little video of this on the web. I don't know who actually did this, if it was actually Domino's or whoever did it, but is this video we're seeing in any way realistic in our lifetime in the next 10 years?
It's a bit of a gimmick. I agree with Charles. All this talk you hear about delivery drones largely has the concept of delivering consumer goods in urban spaces. So this is a bad idea for all sorts of reasons. Number one, it's illegal. You're not allowed. The FAA doesn't allow you to fly over, at least in the United States and many other countries, doesn't allow you to fly over populated areas. B, you've got the battery life issues. C, these things are essentially flying lawnmowers, right? You've got spinning blades. You just don't want that around people. And there are thoughts about how you maybe would kind of hover at 30 feet and lower a package down on the string, but we don't have sense and avoid. These things don't know how to avoid birds and telephone poles and trees, and it just doesn't bear thinking about. Whereas the Africa and other sort of away from the people concepts actually do make sense. There's a place where you don't have good roads, good infrastructure, a place where you can fly over areas without a lot of risk, and a place where fixed wing aircraft, really very inexpensive ones that you don't want to have a pilot or all the safety issues around a pilot, actually may in fact be the best delivery mechanism. It's not the pizza, it's not the taco, it's not the laundry, and it's not the city.
We recently had somebody actually in Manhattan, Charles, I'm assuming this is you, take their quadcopter out over the city, and this person obviously had no idea how to fly a quadcopter because they keep smacking into buildings, as we see here on this Eyewitness News 7, story, and it comes crashing down, I believe. Is this ever going to be realistic to fly them in cities? And what do you think about these rules? I mean, is it? How does that affect the business of this if you can't fly them in cities?
From the perspective of somebody that has one of these, the barrier to entry is very low. So in that particular case, it was a DJI Phantom. He bought it off Amazon for $700. The first thing, and there's not too many places to fly it in Manhattan. So what does he do? He probably flies it off his rooftop or his balcony. And he doesn't know what he's doing, and he loses control, and it crashes on the ground. That's only one of 10 stories probably in New York that have happened, and that's one that sort of bubbled up. But it's sort of a real thing in that people are doing it, and that there's going to be minor issues here. And I think it's a pretty big issue to bring up, especially considering that there's very sort of weak guidelines that the FAA sort of put out. And people have sort of liberal views on how it's interpreted, and then some very conservative. My personal position is to be aggressive, but I always think about safety, and when I do fly, I'm probably the most careful person. The problem is that another guy who's flying it may not be, and there's really nothing stopping from somebody from crashing this into an expressway, hurting somebody on the ground. It is a big deal. Commercially, the jury's out. These things are not fully autonomous yet. So as Chris said, you cannot sort of set this thing out and it avoid power lines and birds and people walking around for that matter.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in that technology. I think that is where the most amount of innovation can happen right now, outside of batteries. Once it's proven that these things are just amazing, they're for the most part fail-safe, and I don't know if we'll ever get to that point. I don't see any reason why bottom line is 50 years from now, I don't think that it's entirely impossible to believe that we're going to see these things in a municipality just freely roaming around doing their business.
Chris, how far are we from having this software and technology so that you could throw a quadcopter out your window, let's assume battery power wasn't an issue, and zip it around, and it would be able to dodge birds and dodge power lines and other things and convince the public that there's nothing really to worry about here. Is that realistic, like Charles says, 50 years from now?
Well, you actually asked two questions.
Yeah.
One is, how long does it take to do it? And the other is, how long does it take to convince the public that it's safe?
Right.
So we can do this in the lab right now using optical technologies. So like if you've seen the movie Prometheus, there's this, they're in these tunnels and they release these little balls called pups and they kind of fly around on their own. They map out the tunnel using some sort
it was an awesome scene.
Sci-fi lidar. So we can do that very slowly, using actual quadcopters rather than balls, using cameras, often laser rangefighters, etc. So it's in a kind of controlled situation, we can do sense and avoid, but I emphasize controlled situation. Once you take it out into the real world and you have to move fast and be doing this sensing and in real time, including really small things in an unknown environment, it just becomes technically harder. Now we'll solve it, in the next. Certainly in the next decade, if not sooner. But then, the question then is, when does the FAA, which is a very conservative organization, when did they become convinced that you have enough nines of reliability to actually allow this? Because remember, their fundamental obligation is safety, not innovation. So they're going to be the last group to be convinced about this. So it actually may happen outside the United States before inside.
One thing, just to be totally sensationalistic, we saw FPS Russia last year do a quadcopter with a machine gun on it. Obviously, drones started in the military. What are your guys' thoughts on this? I mean,
well, that was fake.
Was it really fake?
That was absolutely fake.
So there's no indication that this was fake. I mean, this would be impossible because the gun would weigh too much, and the shooting of the gun would then flip the thing over.
The recoil, the weight, but it was all special effects. It was not real.
Well, that.
But that
raises the question, though. What's that?
Go ahead.
It's not physically impossible. Just that particular one was fake. But with a bigger copter.
Look how convincing it is, though. I mean, my God, I saw the YouTube video and I was just like, I didn't know quadcopters could actually support the weight of a gun. And I was about to ask you guys, how is that possible? But okay, explain why it's physically not possible.
No, so I say physically is possible.
Oh, it is possible.
It was absolutely possible. Yeah, so the weight of the gun is not a problem. You just use bigger motors, more props, bigger batteries, and things like that. Recoil issues, look, I don't know anything about guns, but I'm led to believe there are guns with less recoil. Aiming is not a terrible. If you want to, there's a great book called Kill Decision by Daniel Suarez, which is all about this, and he's a pretty technical guy, and it's kind of engaging to read. So I'm sure it's being done somewhere already, and I have no idea whether it's effective. I certainly don't want it anywhere near me, but there's nothing that physically standing in our way. It's just going to be that I think we as a community need to be really vigilant. If anyone. Because right now we're seeing a lot of this coming out. Okay, it comes out a lot in paintball games because this generation of kids are growing up playing, Modern Warfare, and there's all these drones in these video games, and they're spotting, etc. And right now there's a bunch of people doing something called Game of Drones. Which you get the pun.
Yeah.
And they're actually mounting paintball guns on drones and chasing after people and shooting them. So it's happening already with paintball. And if it's happening now with paintball, how much longer before some idiot decides to put a real gun on it? And the answer is sadly probably not too long. I just hope he gets caught.
Well, and there's even more base issue, which is I was flying this in the park and somebody came up to me and very conservative and said, what's stopping, the first question they say is how much can this thing lift? And even this DJI Phantom can lift about a pound reasonably well. And so they basically said, what's stopping somebody from just strapping a bomb to this thing and then flying it wherever, especially given that the range of these things is about a half a mile? And the answer really is nothing other than, humanity. And it's the reason why people don't do that in cars, and the people that do are sort of sociopaths. I think you can use anything to do anything. But I am concerned that that those sort of use cases and examples will be used to sort of stunt the growth of engineering as far as quadcopters go and the acceptance of the public by them.
All right, let's talk more about the business case. I mean, we all understand you could strap I think it's a very valid point, Charles. I mean, anybody can strap, a vest bomb on and walk into any crowd, and it's a lot easier than a drone, and certainly more effective, as we've sadly seen. So, but let's talk about surveillance and security. That seems to be one of the uses of these things, people using them on ranches or whatever. Do we see a time when, like, you'll order ADT for your house, Chris, and they'll say, oh, well, you can put cameras up and we can put a drone on your roof that goes up every X amount of time and just make sure there's, no SWAT team coming over your hill? Is that going to be the first practical use of it? Security?
We get asked that. Well, the first practical use is already happening. I mean, there's tons of these things doing crop surveys, and as we talked before, scientific sensing and beyond. But to say nothing of Hollywood using these things for just aerial video. Yeah. But yeah, we do get a lot of questions about security, and what you've described is totally doable, right? These things have some kind of thermal camera, which we already use, and they're very easily to they can fly the perimeter. It's very easy to schedule them. But once you start to make it so automated that it's landing, recharging itself automatically, doing this every hour, hour after hour, day after day, protected from the elements, etc. I don't think anyone's developed anything that's quite that, that kind of automatic and let's say unattended. Not that they can't, and there's certainly demand for it.
How far are we from that? I mean, is your company working specifically on that? Because that seems to me is a $100,000 product that any campus would pay for, which is, I love the idea that it's weather protected. So it would fly into like a birdhouse or a doghouse, land on an inductive charging pad, get charged, and then go back out. And if you had 3 of them, they could be rotating 24-hour surveillance, across a college campus.
Sure. There's a company using our platform called Skycatch out here in the Bay Area that's doing just that. It lands on a mat uses GPS to get close, and then uses optical imaging to land precisely on the mat. I actually don't know whether it's an inductive charging. No, I think what it does is it actually rotates until it lines up to a mechanical or electrical charger. So that's already in place. I think it'll be less than a year before that's a product.
And what do you think the deployment of that'll be? I mean, is this going to become standard in cities for police forces? Are police forces using this stuff yet? Charles, do you know?
Every once in a while I see news reports where some municipality has bought the drones for potentially catching people in high risk situations. I've never actually heard of a police use case for it where it was like, they're trying to find some high value target. But I'm not certain that I know the answer to that. I think the problem is that the time that it takes to set these things up and have them mobilized is so long that it's sort of an issue right now. The other thing is that they really are not as autonomous as people think that they are. And for sort of the police force to be able to man these things, I think it's a little bit of a stretch at this point. But yeah, definitely, within the next 10 years, you could imagine a situation like, especially in Chicago, where you have a problem even directing cops that should be in Chicago in the South Side to even get there. And I don't see any reason why they couldn't fly drones over the top and see things that patrol cars couldn't.
Chris, what are your thoughts on this and vis-a-vis privacy? Are there rules today about me flying a quadcopter over my neighbors, Chris, and taking video of them in their backyard? And has that come up? Because you must be running a company in this space. You must receive all the complaints and issues and whatever. Are people doing that kind of stuff? And is there rules against it?
It's really interesting. So it turns out in the United States, at least, that the privacy is typically local, based on what's called community standards. So like here in Berkeley, they have one set of privacy rules, Texas has another, et cetera. The air, however, is regulated on a federal basis by the FAA, which has no mandate to protect privacy whatsoever. And so what you end up finding is communities around, around the country will say, oh my God, we don't want drones, over our heads. Let's pass an ordinance to stop them. And then at some point along this legislative process, the general counsel puts up his hand and said, guys, we actually don't control our own airspace. We don't have jurisdiction here. Then the FAA says, well, you go to the FAA, they say, what are you going to do about it? And the FAA says, well, guys, we don't control privacy. And so you got this kind of, impedance mismatch between the two. What you do have, however, is the FAA already has regulations prohibiting the use over built-up areas. So anyone's flying over your backyard, they're already violating the FAA's regulation. Now, unfortunately, the FAA has no enforcement arm. So what's going to happen is that if somebody has to complain, the FAA then has to investigate. They send a cease and desist. If push comes to shove and you do it again, you might get a $10,000 fine. But they almost never do this. And so what we really don't know exactly is how do we as a country, figure out what the right rules should be? How do we even communicate the right rules, and then how do we enforce the right rules? So I think that you're going to see a lot of, people buying quadcopters off Amazon, flying them over neighbors' yards before we collectively figure out how to handle this.
All right, what is the, here's a really good example of how people are using these, and I see this in LA pretty frequently, quadcopters of your mansion to sell it. So all the houses in Bel Air and Malibu, like these big, $10 million, $20 million houses, are having flyovers done to show you exactly how epic your house is. Not that you'd ever see that view.
That is illegal. So if you get caught by the FAA, at least shooting commercial photography for money, you will get a cease and desist, and then they will, the FAA will try to fine you for $10,000, which I think has really only happened to one person, very high-profile person. But they do send lots of cease and desist. And if you operate a business that openly says that you are going to go to your mansion and take aerial photography of it, you will not be in business for very long, at least in the United States.
That said, that's if you're charging for it, if you're providing it as a service, right, and money changes hands. However, if you want to fly over your own house or your own mansion, I actually think that's probably okay. It's not commercial use, and you're starting to see. It's actually really cool. What you do is you can just sort of point to the house in Google Maps, and then the thing will automatically do 2 passes around it, taking pictures, and then uploads the pictures to services like 123D Catch, which are free, and then turns it into this 3D polygonal model that you can kind of fly around, and it's super cool. And as long as you're not charging for it, I think it's okay.
What's your best guess as to what could be the tipping point with quadcopters? Sort of, and we see this with technology all the time where, they sort of hover around hobbyists, but then there's a breakout moment. Do you have a best guess as to what the breakout moment might be, Charles, and then Chris?
Well, for me particularly, I'm less interested in the quads themselves. Personally, I love to fly them. I think they're awesome. As far as a robot itself, I think we couldn't have foreseen 5 years ago that this was going to be the current apex of robotics. But for me personally, I'm more excited about all of the young people that will get into engineering, specifically mechanical and electrical engineering. A lot of the kids who see these things are basically going to want to build them as adults. And so this is quite possibly the biggest thing to happen as far as like an amazing thing that a kid sees that makes them want to get into technology on a very real way. And so for me, I think it has a bigger impact on kids. Now, as far as like how these things break out into public, I'm not sure, because is this a problem like a desktop computer where people just didn't know that they needed this thing yet, or much more similar to like a 3D printer where it's a smaller niche and now there are certain things that you can do that weren't possible before and isn't technology great, and use it as applied.
Yeah, which do you think becomes a bigger market, 3D printers, Charles, or the quadcopter drone space?
Short-term 3D printers, long-term definitely the quadcopters.
Okay, Chris, what do you think could be a possible tipping point for this space, which actually is, I think the 3D printer analogy that Charles made is pretty good. It's one of those things that is a hobbyist, which showing a lot of promise with entrepreneurs creating companies to actually really accelerate the production and development of these products. What do you think could be a tipping point, Chris?
Yeah, no, I agree with the analogy. So I like the GoPro example because the GoPro camera when it first came out was this really kind of geeky kind of square boxy camera, and it's like who needs that? But then they put it in the hands of extreme athletes, and then YouTube comes along and they start everyone starts seeing these amazing videos, and now it's sold in airports and everywhere else. People understand the advantages of high quality video in an outdoor environment. I think that maybe GoPros with wings, maybe that taking that GoPro, sentiment, that instinct to get great, amazing videos from unique angles, and just allowing those angles to come from the air. Drone, GoPros that'll follow you from the air, GoPros that'll kind of go to places that get angles you couldn't possibly get on your own. With that creativity that we saw the GoPro spur, with robotics and aerial robotics added, I think could be a mainstreaming moment.
In some sense, it's already happened. With as many people that have been sort of loving these things as toys, purely on a toy perspective, it is pretty much the only thing that any of my friends talk about. So in that sense, it's sort of already happened on a sort of consumer basis.
What now you're doing? Can I talk about the project you're doing, Charles, that you told me about earlier?
Sure.
So you're going to do a film about quadcopters or the impact of quadcopters. What do you do? A science fiction film? You're doing Prometheus?
It's a science fiction narrative, but basically heavily revolves around engineers who are building these things. And so, the broader story is what are the unintended consequences of technology? So the things that I want to explore, like yeah, of course, these things are great on a commercial level. There will be an example of a great commercial use of this, and what are the negative impacts of that? And I think it's sort of an important thing to see from a sci-fi perspective, but also from a very realistic perspective. We'll definitely be dealing with this in the next 20 years, if not 50.
And so you're going to actually are you starring in this movie? You have actors in this movie? You wrote the script?
No.
What is
I'm writing it and producing it. That's basically what I'm doing.
Wow, interesting. And there's some negative consequence of the quadcopter that you'll have in there as some hook.
Right.
Many of them.
Right.
Fascinating.
A couple at least.
And we haven't seen a major company make a big move into this space yet. Are there any big companies sort of hovering, as it were, Chris, around this space? Is there, is Bezos and Amazon looking at it, or, some other commercial entity looking at these and saying, hey, this is somewhere we should be investing our money? Google, is doing wearable computing. Is Google sort of looking at this in some way and seeing some future for it for their Maps product?
All of the above. So, obviously the big aerospace companies, the Boeings and the Lockheeds and such, all have, vehicles in this space. Now they're all aimed at the military, so they're incredibly expensive, but they're increasingly coming down. Google has invested in this space. Amazon has invested in this space, usually through the venture arms rather than directly through the companies. You have Parrot, who makes the AR drone, which is also worth mentioning. This is a $300 quadcopter you can buy on Amazon, use your iPad or iPhone to control. They're a publicly traded company, and they're investing a lot in this space. And then you have companies like Monsanto and Trimble, big agricultural companies that are investing in this space as well, because they see this as basically big data for agriculture. So the answer is there's a huge amount of investment right now, and I think we're at the first minute of the day. It's just started.
All right, listen, I didn't ask you guys which one was your favorite launch of the week. We had the drones, or in this case, it might be which one is your favorite project, but the drones using being used to map the Amazonian cloud forest, the quadcopter for the DJ Phantom 2, and the Flying Donkey project. Which one is the most important launch of the week, Charles?
My opinion would be number 2, the Phantom. Anything that can be done to make these more accessible to regular people, so that they can wrap their head around how to use it, have it become more accessible. And then, of course, number 3, while it's a very ambitious goal, is totally awesome. So
what's the next step in the because I see here 25 minutes of flight time, which I thought these things only had like 10 minutes. This is now 25 minutes. What's the state of of batteries, Charles? How many batteries do you have to buy to like do this as a hobby, and how quickly do they recharge? Is there any hope in the near future for these to, transcend the short battery life?
Absolutely. So currently it's lithium polymer. For most self-built quads, especially with no payload, you can probably get a maximum amount of 25 minute. I think 25 minute is the upper bound of what that particular quad can do. That quad, by the way, when you buy a replacement battery, is like almost $200, I think. Whereas if you just buy the lithium polymers on, let's say a AR drone or just anything you build yourself, they're about $30. But the battery tech, as far as lithium polymer goes, it's the same battery tech that you have in your iPad and your iPhone. So in that context, we desperately need new battery tech where the energy density is better than what we have. Right now, effectively, it's like 1/10, or depending on how you calculate the efficiency of a gas motor, 1/10 to 1/100th that of gasoline or petroleum. And so there's talk about what the next battery tech would be, whether it's lithium sulfide, which may give you like a 30% increase from the lithium polymer, or these things called metal air batteries, which the Tesla cars, I guess, issued a patent on recently. The main problem being that they don't generate a whole lot of voltage, so you have to sort of put a lot of them together in serial. But that's really a question for material scientists more so than us. But the demand for better battery obviously is being led by the mobile telecos more so than the drones, and then to a lesser extent the electric car company. So.
Yeah, I mean Elon has said many times that Tesla was in a way enabled by the phone batteries, and in fact, I think the Roadster was packs of actual phone batteries. Chris, did you have a favorite out of these 3 projects that you thought was the most important or best?
I liked the Amazon rainforest one, not because it's any cooler than the others, but because I love like non-military uses. Anytime, right now, when people hear drones, they think Hellfire missiles, military killing people.
Yeah.
And the more positive examples that we can sort of drown out the negative ones with, the more people will change their associations, and the more this will become something that people are excited about rather than afraid of.
All right, there you have it, folks. And for me, I liked the flyingdonkey.org. So we each split. I went for the donkeys and the delivering stuff. Here we'll end on this incredibly awesome video or disturbing video of Turkish police shooting down an RC drone at a protest. I don't know if this is actually real or not, but at some point in this video, it is real. So what happened? Do you know what happened here?
I mean, just like anybody, there's a protest. Somebody with one of these flies it over the top, and they successfully shot it down, which is all kind of hard to do.
Wow, look at that.
They did it.
Bam. That guy's a good shot, man. He destroyed that. Wow. That's pretty amazing. All right, listen, this has been an amazing episode. We learned a lot about quadcopters. It's definitely going to be the future, and Chris Anderson's company, 3D Robotics, is at the forefront of it. Everybody check out 3drobotics.com and buy. Which one should they buy? If you're like, want to buy this?
The Iris is coming out just in time for Christmas. In the meantime, we have a cool Y6 that's we're checking.
And what is the Iris going to run? $12,000?
No, that'll be $740, I think.
$740. That's the one I'm going to get. And does it have a camera on it, or you mount a camera on it, you said?
You mount a GoPro on it.
Yeah. Okay. So you put a GoPro. All right. There you have it. And Charles Forman, you can follow him. He's just at Charles Forman on Twitter, and we'll look for your movie. Thanks for coming on the program, Charles.
Thanks so much.
All right. And hey, thanks to our sponsors for doing a great job supporting the program. Mandrill, not MailChimp, Mandrill, their transactional email product, and Hiscox. Thank you so much for supporting the program. Great job, Brandis, Gina, Kristen, and Jade, and everybody else out there. And we'll see you next time on This Week in Startups. Thanks, guys. Well done.